Good to go. Okay. Thank you for that. All right, perfect. All right, so again, welcome everybody. We'll get started here. Um, I'll pause. Does anybody have any questions or comments relative to discussions that we had in March? Just a quick reminder, that was basically we didn't have as much of a strict uh, you know topic that we were shooting for. We were trying to determine what we were going to do moving forward, and I think that that's crystallized now um, into this month we're doing this PFAS discussion, and then we're going to be going headlong into a an environmental justice mode. Um, and I've got a lot to talk about relative to that. Not necessarily in the meeting today. If we don't have time, we don't have time. But certainly, I think you've seen many of you on this call have seen the emails that have come across in the last couple of days relative to EJ, and we're, I think beginning to gain some momentum there. All right. Any questions, concerns, curiosities, insults, things like this? All right. Very well. So I'll jump right into this. I'm going to go into um, teacher mode here for a little bit. Please feel free to stop me at any moment in time. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
My presentation? Perfect. Um, Feel free to stop me, ask questions. I not only encourage that, but enjoy it. So let's begin. Okay, so this is a term that has been thrown around for, it feels like only months, but it's been about a decade that we've really sort of been seeing some flashing red lights about this compound. Um, Now, of course, we've known about PFAS as an issue as the public for longer than that. I'd say about 20 years. But industry has known about the issues, the health issues relative to PFAS, going all the way back to when it was first invented and then put into mass production. Um, so PFAS, what does it stand for? It stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. You can see a chemical skeleton there, and you'll notice the number of fluorines that are on that carbon backbone. Um, in the space filling model at the top, you see the green there are the fluorines, and then depending upon the compound, this happens to be one of the more popular ones. It's PFOA. That's perfluorooctanoic acid. Um, and so you find that there's 8 carbons and there are fluorines all over them. And what this does is it makes whatever that compound is applied to, well, it makes it behave rather like a fat, actually. It's hydrophobic. It acts to do all sorts of things, not least of which is keep food from sticking to cookware, water sticking to clothing, stains sticking to sofas, and in the case of firefighting foam, flames engulfing aircraft, actually. It's used quite a bit, as I think most of us here know, relative to Pease Air Force Base, now Pease Trade Port. So ubiquitous, not just ubiquitous as a compound, but it sticks around, contrary to its chemical nature. It stays for long, long, long periods of time. It bioaccumulates, meaning that as it'll build up on the tissue of bodies of animals, ourselves included, but also things that we eat. And lastly, it biomagnifies, which means, of course, that uh, small fish that have PFAS are eaten by larger fish, which then get PFAS, which are passed on to us. And as it goes up the chain, the amount of PFAS or whatever the toxin happens to be magnifies. Okay, so this is from CDC. This is, I don't know how many folks have seen an image like this before, but what I think is really interesting about this is that oops, so Portsmouth is right there as one of the example locations of all of the places that you might select in the country. Portsmouth, New Hampshire is one of the biggies. And I think that the more we start testing for PFAS of all different types of stripes, pardon me, the more that we're going to find that it's a lot more than just Portsmouth. I suppose that there is a bit of a silver lining here in that as compared with, you know, numbers from 1999 to 2000, comparing those values with the general US population in 2017 and 2018, there has been a marked decrease in the amount of, you know, blood level in micrograms per liter of PFOA. That's fantastic. We see a similar kind of a thing going on with a variety of the other types of PFAS as well. But that said, the extent of the issue, even though it's falling in the general population, these numbers probably are, it's probably a little bit too early to start celebrating relative to the amount of PFAS that happens to be found in human beings. What does it do? Well, see, this is the thing. I mean, what doesn't it do? So I mentioned earlier that it behaves rather like a fat. Now there's fats, of course, are one of the four major different types of macromolecules that make up living things. The others being carbohydrates and nucleic acids and proteins. And so lipids are heavily involved in what's known as cell signaling. And if there are those of you that are keen on such things, cell signaling is basically how the outside world communicates with the cell, which then turns around and communicates back out to the outside world, adjusting and changing. And these things, this kind of communication back and forth between cells and between cells in the outside world is really important during some parts of time of our lives, like, for instance, early childhood development and development in utero. And if you add a compound that muddies those waters, that acts like a lipid, but instead of signaling properly, it turns signals on or off in the wrong way, then you can get, well, what you see here on this diagram. You can get delayed mammary gland development. You can get lower birth weight. You can get early puberty onset. You can get low sperm count and mobility. If any of these things sound like common things that, well, not common, unfortunately, too common things that we continue to be dealing with more and more as a society recently, well, there may be a connection there. And that is something that I think is going to be the focus of significant amounts of research and investigation going forward. So I mentioned Pease-Traysport as one of the high-profile PFAS sites in New Hampshire. The other one, of course, as the Honorable Wendy Thomas is quite familiar with, Saint-Gobain Performance Plastics in Merrimack. And unfortunately, as John Swan is more than aware, the North Country Environmental Services crisis in Littleton. And as a matter of fact, there are no, as far as I know, there are no significant waste sites in the state of New Hampshire, or indeed in the world, that don't have significant issues of PFAS. So, how does this happen? Human beings are exposed through a variety of factors. So through industry creates PFAS, it goes into the environment. Human beings are, of course, exposed to the environment through the air, through the water, and to the soil. Consumer and industry products. So how many folks in here, just quick show of hands, have a Teflon or had until recently a Teflon pan in their kitchen, right? At some point in time in the last 10 years, did you have Teflon in your kitchen? Probably. You didn't like, you mean, you're like, I know it's not good, but I don't know why. And we know why. And there are probably more reasons than that. And of course, waste management or waste mismanagement, as the case may be. And so PFAS end up getting pulled out of the waste material. And even if it's a lined, you know, transfer station or dump or whatever you want to call it, oftentimes mistakes are made, overflows happen, and highly concentrated, PFAS water that's highly concentrated with PFAS ends up in groundwater and in surface waters. Who's at risk? By the way, these, as it says there at the bottom of the page, I know the type is small. These are all from Dartmouth and the PFAS study that they put together, as well as the infographics that they did specifically for the state of New Hampshire. Yeah, everyone is at risk. But in particular, residents living near high levels of PFAS in the water, air, and soil. We don't know what those places are until we continue testing. Please see the image over there on the right of the screen. Those are all of the testing sites throughout the state of New Hampshire so far. Anyone drinking from water contaminated with this, pregnant women and babies whose children are, especially vulnerable. People who use products that contain this stuff, right? Remember when everyone thought it was groovy that Mickey D's switched over from styrofoam to those lined paper packages? Yeah, yeah. Those paper packages are lined, of course, with PFAS, right? And so add to this, folks that eat certain packaged foods or fish that contain PFAS. And even though these things are starting to be removed from the system, it's still not ideal. How many folks have looked at the sampling map that DES has provided? How many folks have actually had a look at this? John, I'm not surprised. I think you and I both like GIS more than we should. And so I won't drill into that right now unless someone would like me to, and you can come off mute and say so. But suffice to say, you click through to that, it brings you to, actually, I'll drop the what's it, URL right into the chat so that folks can investigate that on their own time. It is not the easiest thing to navigate through. You're better off by zooming in on the map to where you would like to investigate. And once you go into, for instance, this site right here, and then you can go to this station number, and then it'll give you all sorts of fun facts about how terrible that location happens to be. Okay. So I'll go away from that for the time being and go back to, hopefully, where are we? Okay. Okay. This is directly from DES's PFAS website, which I have there again at the bottom. So looking at PFAS in air, biosolids, drinking water, groundwater, surface water quality, and waste sites. And although we're going to be focusing on drinking water for sort of the balance of the discussion, all of these are important to consider. And I wanted to bring up one study in particular that's come out, and I'm sure that there will be more, that speaks to what I have been discussing earlier relative to bioaccumulation and biomagnification. Um, and so we're going to find, of course, that there are going to be lots of folks throughout the state, throughout the region, throughout the world that are getting exposed to PFAS uh, through fish populations, through eating freshwater fish. Um, Even if they've thrown away all of their Teflon pans, they still very well may have this thing going for them. All right, so okay, here we go. All right, so that's the background. I know that that was real fast, but it meant I didn't mean to give everyone a full dissertation on PFAS. I just wanted to make sure that we were all operating or all playing from the same sheet of music. Does anybody have any questions before I drill into the new rulemaking? You can just hop off mute if you're so inclined. Okay, awesome. So, quickly, for those of you that don't know, the federal rulemaking process is similar to state and local level rulemaking. It takes place within the kind of Article 2 aspects of the Constitution, and therefore deals with administrative law. The federal rulemaking process is usually months and oftentimes years of agency effort that then, over time, once the rule is proposed, it gets put into the Federal Register as a proposed rule, and it's open to public comment. And this is something that we're going to be hearing from John at the end of this discussion, relative to public comment on the permitting for Clean Water Act, Waters of the United States permitting for the proposed plant, or I'm sorry, for the proposed landfill in Dalton. So public comment, a rule is considered final and therefore enforced once it's published in the Federal Register. And this down here, I think, is really important to mention, and it actually is the reason why I decided to create this slide in the first place. A rule, any administrative rulemaking, whether it's EPA or whether it's Army Corps of Engineers or whether it's Department of Justice, you name it, any rule is subject to judicial review if someone outside says, hey, you guys created this rule in a way that is arbitrary and capricious and all of these other fun words, and they can challenge it. And I frankly would expect that this new rule from the Biden administration, which I'm going to talk about right now, is going to be challenged by industry and by other folks that may not necessarily want to be regulated in this fashion. We shall see. So going back to October of 2021, Biden Harris administration launches their plan to combat PFAS pollution. And so when I said that this rulemaking took months and years, well, in this case, it did take years, and the public water utilities in New Hampshire have known about this rule coming down the pipe for at least a year, if not more so. I think more than closer to 2 years. So the goals here were to consider the life cycle of PFAS. Life cycle is a really important component. Oops, got ahead of myself there. Life cycle is really important. It's not just looking at it at the very end of things, but looking at the production and the away or throwing away aspect of it. So all along the lifespan of this particular compound, things need to be adjusted, considered, amended, and otherwise solved. Get upstream of the problem, hold polluters accountable, ensure science-based decision-making, and prioritize protection of disadvantaged communities. That last bullet point there is relative to the Biden administration's broader Justice 40 initiative, which if you don't know about the Justice 40 initiative, I think you'll be keen on that. It's something I'll be talking about relative to environmental justice more broadly in the meetings to come. But basically what it amounts to is that 40% of effort and funding that goes towards environmental cleanup and whatnot is going to go or be shunted towards communities that are historically underfunded and overburdened with environmental hazards and conditions. Relative to that middle one there, this is, I believe, something that we can address as an action item relative to the Army Corps of Engineers. And I'll leave it to John to discuss more about that in a few. So what does this new rulemaking mean for New Hampshire? Okay, look, it amends the Safe Drinking Water Act. This was actually kind of a brilliant move on the part of the Biden administration. So instead of trying to amend or add things relative to the Toxic Substances Control Act or to the Clean Water Act or something along these lines, they went after the Safe Drinking Water Act. Who doesn't want their drinking water to be safe? Right? I mean, it really was a brilliant stroke. DES is compelled to enforce what comes out of the ASTWA, like they are with all federal statutes. What it does, it improves or lowers the maximum contaminant level, or MCL, for 5 different PFA substances. Now, I think anyone that knows anything about this realizes that there are thousands, if not, I mean, hundreds, if not thousands of different PFAS. So they're going after the ones that are, for the time being, the most understood and the most prevalent in testing that's out there. Again, low-hanging fruit, makes sense to do so, I think. What else does it do? It provides $1 billion in new funding to public drinking water systems for PFAS testing and treatment specifically. There's another $9 billion on the back of this that was already put aside to help certain water quality issues that had to do with PFAS as well. And then the new standards must be implemented within 5 years. Public drinking water facilities and utilities have a few years. They have 3 years to run their tests and figure out what their risk exposure is. Which, and if they're smart, of course, they'll also be working on the implementation for clearing that PFAS out of the water as they're doing so. But they have 5 years to accomplish that. If there is a challenge, and again, I think that's a pretty small if. I think there's going to be a challenge to this particular rulemaking. They will probably go after timing and argue about the costs. Here in New Hampshire, so you can see there, I have the reference for the sort of PFAS rulemaking from DES. The old PFAS MCLs for New Hampshire specifically are what you see here. So these are what these various acronyms stand for: perfluorooctanoic, perfluoroanonoic, perfluorohexane sulfonic acid. These are not nice things. And you can appreciate how, it was more useful to simply refer to them as PFAS. The new PFAS MCLs are as follows. So we've got from 12 parts per trillion reduced down to 4, from 15 parts per trillion for PFAS down to 4 as well. And for these other compounds here, we are also seeing reductions. We're also having the introduction of so-called Gen X chemicals. That's a trade name for what are effectively, let's see here. Actually, I wrote this down because it's well, I can get back into that later if you really want to talk about it. But the point is this: It's also a nasty compound, and it has been set up to be at parts per trillion instead, and added to the list. So now New Hampshire is going to have to add Gen X chemicals. Another important addition that was not in the prior rules or standards for New Hampshire was the mixing of two or more of these compounds of the PFNA, PFHXS, Gen X, and PFBS. The mixing of two or more of these cannot have a hazard index of above 1. And what does that mean? Well, it means that when you tally up the various concentrations, that if it passes that threshold of being called a 1, and if you really want to talk about the math, I'm sure I could pull it up for you, but I don't want to talk about it right now. That hazard index of 1, if that's surpassed, then you are in violation of this new rulemaking. The other thing that I thought was worth mentioning is that in this rulemaking for both PFOA and for PFAS, the EPA was setting a maximum contaminant level goal, or an MCLG, of goose egg, 0, which is not enforceable. All of these numbers are enforceable, right? And they can levy fines and so on if you blow past these values. But in recognizing that there is no health-based, that 0 is the health-based amount of PFAS that is acceptable in drinking water, it puts it into the same category as lead. It puts it into the same category as a variety of other compounds that we know that there are no safe levels for. And so that's where we're headed eventually as we try to get through this. Finally here, so EPA has gone whole hog on the sort of infographic, putting out an explanation of this particular new government-wide effort to reduce PFAS. And so they're going to put the resources out there, infrastructure investments, money, obviously in a variety of different ways, but also know-how and equipment. The whole of agency approach of restricting and cleaning up and researching, lowering exposure to PFAS. I think it's safe to say that the feds have certainly gotten the message that they needed to get out ahead of this one. And of course, they're too late. They always are. This is federal environmental law. That's how it works. And that, as they say, is that. Any questions relative to that? Hopefully that wasn't too boring or long.
Yes, question. Paul Friedrichs here.
Hey, Paul.
So are the new standards going in the direction of preventing these things to be manufactured, or they're just trying to clean up? I don't understand how 0 can be the goal and we're still manufacturing and putting in all these products.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's I think so. This new rulemaking is specifically gauged at cleaning it out of out of drinking water. But that being said, they have this whole battery of other rulemakings that they have in the works, but that haven't been as easy to pass as a drinking water amendment, relative to clamping down on the production, dissemination, and use of these things. And that's working its way through at the state level in a variety of states, not least of which is New Hampshire, right? I mean, I've seen several bills out there at this legislative session talking about banning them from use in consumer items and so on and so forth. I think, like I said at the beginning of the talk, though, that this is purely the easiest thing, the least controversial thing for them to go and say, hey, we need to get this out of drinking water. We need to do this yesterday. Let's make it happen.
Rob, I have a question. Clark Corson here.
Hi, Clark.
My question is, what's the half-life of What is the residency half-life of PFAS in a human being?
So that that's going to, like a lot of toxicants, that's going to depend upon, volume of distribution and things like this. There's no doubt about that. The problem is that I think the short answer is we don't know yet. It doesn't seem to stick around in tissue. Uh, let's put it this way. There are conflicting results that I've seen. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I put together this presentation. I'm still learning about all of this. I'm not researching PFAS myself, so I don't want to overstep my bounds here. However, what I understand is that it does accumulate, it does magnify, and therefore it's going to be, intergenerational as far as the how long it's going to last. Now, that doesn't mean, of course, it gets necessarily passed on. However, I can envision a circumstance in which these compounds can cross the placenta, for instance, and end up in children. So I think that's part of the issue relative to developmental problems.
Thank
I
you.
think the jury is still out, though, and on the half-life of the compound itself. But I would imagine that it's not going to be short. John.
Yeah, hi. So I had my water tested. DES has a program you can have it tested for free in 2021, and I'm on the map. My PFOA is 6.2, and I'm in Windham, downwind from Merrimack, the St. Combine site, which I assume is where I'm getting that from. But it kind of seems like DuPont knew about this 20 years ago and moved to New Hampshire that had less stringent pollution controls than Vermont, where they came from. So, is there a way? I know they're worrying first about public water supplies, but how about private water supplies? Can I get this, you know, can I get St. Gobain to pay for water treatment or something with this new rule? Because it wasn't apparently qualified as dangerous before, but now I think
It is
it's
now.
clear that it is.
Yes. Now there's federal money that has been earmarked for private wells as well as the public treatment facilities. Um, to what extent they're going to make the polluters pay? Well, I think we can all realize that that's going to be a very, very long road for getting, for recovering money from these organizations and then putting it into trust funds to be able to clean up this stuff. And I think that is a question that I think that's a question that the folks that are operating wastewater treatment plants in particular are going to be asking. And I think one of the things that is still kind of under the radar generally is the amount of wastewater from landfills that is going into wastewater treatment facilities, and to what extent those facilities are or are not capable of handling that, particularly under these new rules. Once tests start coming back, I think that we're going to realize that we're in a world of hurt relative to the amount of toxicants that are going into the water supply.
Exactly. The map that you showed, when you drill down, you can see there's lots of yellow and red, but there's a lot of green. But that's using old numbers. So my site looks green, even though it's now not compliant with safe drinking water. So I think there would be a lot more red there if they updated the color codes with the new numbers.
And I think that that's something we try to focus here in the network on action items, and I believe that that's one of them, is that we should continue to press DES on updating and what their timeline is going to be for that, for changing that, that threshold in their GIS program. And I have a feeling that you're right, John, that the map is going to look a lot more orange or yellow or red than it currently does. That's something we should consider as an action item. And I'll have to think. We'll all have to think about how we're going to accomplish that task, how we're going to approach that. John, so Patsy, John is not on the phone. That's actually Anne Podlipny, I believe.
Okay. Yeah,
And
I'm gonna say
lost
something.
John.
I hope I don't hurt your feelings, but I have had John, he's been coming to our meetings. This is the second time this has happened this week. And if you don't get him to talk right away, he's probably not gonna stay. So just anybody, that if you ever ask him to come to a meeting, he's really, really busy. He doesn't have time, I don't think, he just has to come in and tell you what he's gonna say, and he's probably gonna leave. So I'm kind of
Okay.
heartbroken because this is, it's happened before, and this is the second time this week.
Ah,
Oh,
I wish
wanted me
that I had known
talk to him
that.
right away. So that's sorry too.
Okay.
But anyway,
I wish that I'd known that. I would have gotten him.
well, I
But-
felt like going, let John talk first, but I couldn't.
I'll see if I can reach him.
I emailed him, John Gage. I emailed him, please come back, but I don't know. You can try. Go
Okay.
ahead. But anyway, sorry. I'm sorry, Rob, but I just wanted you to know that it's
I have
the way the ball bounces.
that's good to know. Thankfully, as is typical, I have kind of a backup. And so what I'm going to do right now is I want to drop the public notice as a PDF into the chat that I was going to ask John to speak about. I worked with John in the summer of 2023 in my externship up at CLF in Concord on this PFAS issue. I can speak to it. I just didn't want to be the only one talking tonight. Because as much as I can geek out about this stuff forever, I am not the be all end all, even remotely close. So I needed some other folks to sort of chime in. Anyways, what you'll see in the PDF that I dropped into the chat is the public notice from U.S. Army Corps of Engineers relative to the notice and comment period that is now open until May 8th. So the clock is ticking. We actually don't have much time left to get in some comments about this. And even though there are many of us in this call that do not live in Dalton or in Littleton or even north of the Notch, we all still have a stake in this, in that we live in New Hampshire and we're downstream of a lot of these places. And I would say that it may even be useful to mention the fact that the wastewater from North Country Environmental Services, operated by Casella, the same company that is trying to build this new facility over in Dalton, they truck their wastewater from the North Country to Concord. Correct, Clark.
Yep.
To Concord, where they inject it into one of two different POTWs, so that's publicly owned treatment works. And we're talking hundreds of thousands of gallons a month of wastewater. And we don't know exactly how much PFAS is in it because they're not really testing for it at this point. And so we are, of course, downstream. The drinking water that water goes into the Merrimack comes to us here in Nashua and Tingsboro and so on and so forth, right? And so we have a stake in opposing the development of more in the way of these kinds of facilities. Because even if it's lined, that wastewater still works its way somehow into the system. And Clark, do you have something to say? I think you do.
I'm sorry, what's your question, Rob?
It seemed like you had something to say, and I wanted to stop.
No. Well, I would just say that Cindy Wilmington, who's a gubernatorial candidate, is well aware of this and deserves a lot of support for taking. I said this to you, Rob, maybe 2 months ago during one of the, and you guys just do a great job. My company, CSWS, is just not equipped to produce these webinars yet, but I can't stress enough the need to, and I was on the phone for an hour and a half today with Sherry Dutsey on bond bill issues. I can't
He was
stress
actually supposed to be here tonight.
I must have gone a road. I can't stress enough the need to organize a small group of people to approach each of the gubernatorial candidates and each person running for the Senate particularly. And God help us if Sununu gets reelected.
Well, I do. Well, I mean,
I know he says he's not going to run, but
he says he's not, but who the heck knows, right?
exactly.
I can tell you that Kelly Ayotte would certainly be pretty pissed off, but that's okay.
Anyway.
So I do believe that, Clark, we took your comments a couple of months ago to heart, and I think that we've been having it amongst the steering committee conversations about bird dogging, about the types of questions that we'd like to ask, and this 100% is right up there. I know that's the case and then I think I can speak for everyone here by saying that that's something that we're very much interested in trying to get involved with.
Well, I told Sherry today that I would exceed and get on her committee with Germana and a gentleman from, but anyway, it's exciting to try to effectuate change, Rob, but it has to be organized.
You bet.
I think just as a note to the New Hampshire network, we probably should try to set up a meeting with all of the gubernatorial candidates, and have somebody from each working group there, have a quick 20 minutes of information to give them and hear what they have to say. We can't endorse because.
Sorry, go ahead, John. Finish.
What's that, Emily?
I was just going to say,
I'm done.
As a group at New Hampshire Healthcare Workers for Climate Action, we've been pondering the idea of a series of webinars with candidates after the primaries, where we would get groups such as ours and yours to put together questions. The overall focus for us would want to be on climate and health, but questions like this could be addressed as well. And we're kind of working out as a working group how that might be able to function. But if it's something both of our organizations could co-sponsor to get more names behind it, and something we're going to work on setting up. So this might be a good venue to ask these questions if we're able to put it into fruition. I'm going to reach out to League of Conservation Voters as well, see if they have some supporter ideas, but hopefully we could get something in the works and collaborate on that.
Emily, that's great to hear. The idea is to force these candidates to include a plank on their platform, which recognizes that the New Hampshire network and company need to be listened to because we are the on-the-ground experts, if you will, John Swan included, for what they should be hearing in lay language. And Rob, your presentation today was excellent. It wasn't too technical. These candidates don't want technical. They don't understand it, for God's sakes, any more than I do. But if they know that people care and are up in arms when they learn that, 52% of stuff coming into New Hampshire comes from Massachusetts, that water is in our PFAS, that John Gage has 6.2 in his drinking water and so forth. Not to mention the fact that Pepsi-Cola, which is Dasani, their water, Coca-Cola rather, comes out of the Atlanta, Georgia reservoir. So trace PFAS, not just in the plastic containers, but in the water itself. I mean, it just doesn't end. And the more you know, the scarier it gets. So why
Agreed.
has it taken this long? Not for us. Well, yeah, for me too. But why has it taken so long for people in a position to do something to actually listen and want to do something? And that's why I'm so
Well, I
excited
think
about this upcoming elect. And I live in Plymouth, Mass. And I'll tell you, Massachusetts is so far ahead of New Hampshire in terms of this. It's as much as I hate to admit it, it is. But anyway, doing great work, you guys.
Appreciate that.
but I think it's our voices that will make the politicians care. I met all of my state rep candidates in the last election, and I asked some climate questions. And in a candidate night, she was asked something related to climate, and she said, "Well, I only had questions about this from one of my constituents, and so it doesn't seem like a very important thing." So it really does matter to them if they get 10 people or 20 people asking about it as opposed to not hearing about it.
Yeah, no, it does make a difference. And we'll get this discussion. We're gonna, pop this up on the website, and maybe we can get, a little more play time out of it. That would be excellent too. As far as hopefully everyone had, I mean, I'm certain that you've seen the emails coming across from John Swan relative to the Army Corps of Engineers and treaty. I think it's valuable to have a look at their actual, public notice, because it provides, I think, some language that you may want to use in your comment. You don't have to be a pro in this field. I mean, if anyone spent any time on the, on the Federal Register and sort of read some of the comments, I hate to admit it, but I have. Many of them are just simply folks that are really concerned, and they just need their voice to be heard. And I think that that's something that we have an opportunity for here as well. So if that's the action item out of this, then I'm a happy camper, even if John's, internet was zipped out by weather. We have been having very weird weather here, by the way. I mean, I'm in the Lakes region right now, and it's gone from sunny to storming to sunny to storming about 5 times so far today. So I'm not surprised that perhaps north of the notch is a little weird. Okay.
And you wonder why hummingbirds get confused? So
Yeah, and
anyway,
they have those onboard, sort of, orienteering devices, that I don't think we have. In fact, I'd be pleasantly surprised to know if we could follow, magnetic lines of flux all on our own. But I sincerely doubt that. Um, any other comments or questions? I think you know, I think we've definitely nice, very nice. I think we've solved any issues that Paul may have with getting rest. Um, and and so I'll be happy to take credit for that. I always like to see folks. At any rate, yeah, no, I enjoyed. See, the other thing, of course, is that I think those of you that have gotten to know me is that I enjoy putting this stuff together. I was lucky this week that I was off of school, so I could pour a little more time into it.
Thank you
But
so much. It's great.
the slide deck, I've already converted it to a PDF. I've shared that with Emily. And I think, if folks want to, I don't know where the best place to host that is. I don't know if it's better to just have have the video available so that the description is there. We'll just take that. We'll go through as we can.
Yeah, I can share tomorrow the recording with the working group and then slides that way. And then if you don't want to post the slides online, I'm happy to create just like a shared Google folder. It's what I do for the other working groups that we have access to, whatever works best.
I'm happy to post them online too. Everything's
Okay.
attributed, so I have no issue relative to that.
Yeah, because we could upload it onto well, you know how to upload it onto your page on the network
I
website.
could put it onto the page. Yeah, I just don't know how that would look just yet. I'm not sure what the right element to use is, and we can talk offline about that.
I mean, I just usually take the YouTube embed code and just put them on. And the plastics working group, of course, also does a lot of PFAS stuff, so I can also put it on that website easily. I might leave you to do the one for the New Hampshire network, but I'll definitely share it on the 10 Towns Toolkit.
Marvelous. That's great.
And we have a New Hampshire Network YouTube channel that we could load this onto. I'm not sure where you're planning on uploading it, but that's
Yeah,
where the
that sounds great too.
Okay.
Marina, thank you for joining us. Do you have, I don't want to like call you out or anything, but it's such a small group that I figured I would at least acknowledge your presence and wonder if you have any comments or curiosities.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Nice to see everyone. My name is Marina Vaz. So I am the Nashua-based environmental justice advocate with the Conservation Law Foundation. This is a position that we have in Nashua and then in Manchester as well. Yeah, and so thank you, Rob, for a great presentation. I definitely feel like I'm coming out of this like knowing way more about PFAS. And thanks for sharing also that call to action to put in some public comment with the US engineer. I'm gonna mess up the
It's the
name,
Army
but
Corps.
anyways.
Yeah, no, it's the Army Corps of Engineers, USACE.
Yeah. So I actually think I was like just briefly looking it over. I think that we may already have submitted something at CLF, but I can definitely double check because we should. I know some of our attorneys and a legal fellow are working on like gosh, what do they call it? Landfill and like zero waste issues.
Absolutely.
So yeah. And
Well,
I would say
encourage you. I would
go
encourage you
ahead.
to submit a comment as yourself, Marina Vaz.
Okay.
Right. And the more voices, the better. And you don't have to do it through your capacity as anything except for a concerned citizen that lives you live in Manchester, right? Your
Yes.
water comes from that same river that they are pouring enormous amounts of PFAS laden wastewater into. So, it is of concern to you, your neighbors, and so on and so forth. So I would strongly, I'm certain that CLF has already applied all of the pressure that they possibly can relative to this, and then some. So, yeah, I would suggest,
These air-based Portsmouth
Yeah.
water comes from a reservoir in Madbury, which is adjacent to the Cocheco River.
Mm.
I mean, I've just traced this so thousands of times. But anyway, Carol and I are anxious to meet with you guys on the New Hampshire network and see if we can't develop some podcasts or webinars to strengthen the cause.
Love it. No, it's excellent.
Okay.
I just
But
popped
I'm going to
into
leave you
the
guys.
chat.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Excellent.
Thanks a
Rob.
lot,
Good
Clark, for
job.
joining. Patsy?
Nice seeing everybody.
I just popped into the chat I guess it's probably like a flyer that you can use that has some of the graphics that you use for your presentation. So that's one of the things that we have already up on the 10 Towns Toolkit. So I don't know if people are tabling and they want just a one-page thing and they don't want to use the whole slideshow.
No, that's perfect. And You are correct I did pull a significant amount from that Dartmouth effort, which they did a phenomenal job on, and credit where credit is due on that score. And like I said, I attributed everything in the presentation, so I won't be running afoul of things along these lines. Just one last thing. I know it's 6 o'clock. I'll let everyone go in a moment here, but our next meeting for the last Wednesday of May, we're going to be kicking off our environmental justice policy campaign. Is really what it comes down to. And even, I was discussing this with Marina and with Anne and Sherry at the Nashua Sustainability Fair that last weekend, and sure enough, only a couple days after that discussion, I received an email from EPA Region 1 asking to talk to the New Hampshire network about our efforts relative to environmental justice. And so we're going to be teeing that up. I sent out an email to them, just sort of get a small group of us together. If there's anyone on this call that would be interested in being a party to that discussion with Region 1, please let me know. And we'll get the date to you once they set it up. So yeah, we're going to continue along this pathway, trying to develop something that looks like an environmental justice statute here in New Hampshire. It's long overdue. CLF, Tom Irwin's from CLF at the most recent EJ roundtable made a pitch for exactly this, and I'd like to help him to realize it. So that's what the environmental working group is going to be doing for the foreseeable future. And that's kind of where we're at. Any questions? Any comments, concerns, curiosities?
Does anybody know what a safe dental floss is and which dental floss to avoid?
I actually do. So I recently learned before today, but recently that yeah, there's like PFAS on like Glide and stuff, which is what I use. But there's this brand called Dr. Tongues. I'll put it in the chat, and they are allegedly PFAS free.
But it might be made of nylon.
Mm.
We'll read it. I have one that's silk. I'd have to run up to my bathroom and get it. It's made out of silk.
That sounds expensive.
I don't know. I don't even know what it costs. I never even look. I just buy
Yeah, no, it would be better than
I'll
PFAS between your
write
teeth.
it down and send it to you by email, because I don't think you probably want me wait for me to run up to my bathroom.
Rob, can you hear me? This is Ann on the phone.
Yes, we can hear you. Hi, Ann.
Oh, good. I just got unmuted. I was jumping up and down trying to unmute myself, and I just did, so I'm sorry for butting in. But I just wanted to thank you for the presentation and for sending the slides to me so I could see it. And I had a question about if we get that climate action plan approved and New Hampshire has one, will we get better and federal funding to do the PFAS cleanup? In other words, are we being held back by not having this climate action plan?
No, actually, these things are completely separate. And okay, because of the fact that this new rulemaking is under the Safe Drinking Water Act, DES is compelled to comply regardless of any other funding that may come along the lines.
Oh, okay.
No,
okay.
It's not it's not pegged to that at all.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so the Pure Silk, what's the brand? What is it? So Patsy's holding up her dental floss for Better by Design. Better by Design is what it is. Very nice. Oh, and they're
PFAS.
nice.
but I don't like it as much as the Glide stuff, I gotta tell you. But
Of course not. Of course not. No one, I mean,
they'll
that's the
improve
thing.
it.
It was too good to be true. It always was. It always was.
I'm really
Oh.
sorry. I have no idea what it costs.
Thank you, Patsy. No, I was joking about that. Silk sounds expensive, but I think there's not too much of it in a spool of dental floss. I wanted to put in a plug for iron cookware, cast iron skillets and griddles. You won't miss your PFAS pans ever again, and you'll wonder why we ever switched 50 years ago from using them, because they just get better and better, and they give you a little iron, which some people actually could use a little iron anyway. But they're great nonstick once you get the hang of using them.
I have so my wife gave me for Christmas a couple years ago a Le Creuset crepe pan that I love so much. Now I know why she gave it to me. She gave it to me because if I liked the crepe pan, then I would make more crepes for her. So, you know, it's worked out really for both of us.
Lodge is a good manufacturer too, and cheap. You can get, decent stuff. The best stuff is on eBay. They made it Griswold and Wagner 70 years ago. It's just thinner, lighter, but it's hard to get flat old stuff. A lot of the stuff is warped, so you have to really be careful if you buy that. But really happy with the Lodge.
Does it work on an induction cooktop?
It works great on an induction
I
cooktop.
don't have one of those yet. I just curious. Well, that's good to know because I need to have that information. Oh.
Yeah.
That is good to know.
Yeah,
I had the same question. I also do not. I have an electric stove. I don't have an induction. But my goodness, I would very much like to have one at some point.
Cast iron is very conductive. It works great.
But Rob,
I don't have one either.
You should
Sorry,
get an induction cooktop. They're inexpensive, and you can do most of your cooking on an inexpensive countertop. You can get 1 burner, 2 burner, 4 burners, whatever. They're inexpensive.
Huh.
So you can keep your electric range, but most of your cooking, you can put this right on top of your electric range and cook on the cooktop. They're not expensive. Look into it.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You use a lot less electricity.
Even better. Oh, I love it.
Sometime we all just have these just self-help groups to want each other. I love this because even though I spend a lot of time doing my own little personal things like finding this stuff, I didn't know about the cast iron on the induction stove, and I just learned today or yesterday that you can just buy just a induction cooktop, not buy a whole big thing that gets installed. So
I'm gonna mention that. I'm gonna mention that to my bride as soon as she gets back from. She's actually in Arizona, Navajo Nation, as we speak. She's out there, painting houses and building stuff on the reservation with some of our students. So.
Okay, thanks for doing this, Rob.
Okay, thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for coming.
A little bit, John.
See you next time.
Okay, great, Patsy.